Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! We're back for another segment on our Budget 300B build. As I said in the first video, this is designed as a price-conscious build on a 300B that still sounds nice. And I'm not going to pretend like this is the ultimate 300B, but it's using the same circuit design, the Cascode 6S and 7. It's using the same operating point for the 300B tube, the same B plus and all that stuff that I use on my more expensive amps. And so it should have that same kind of flavor. And even though I'm on a budget, still going to use a Mundorf coupling cap, and we're just going to save money in the other places that I don't think are as big of an impact on the sound. And hopefully we get something that I'm proud to put the Skokie Designs label on. And honestly guys, if it doesn't perform up to my expectations, then we're just not going to be doing this. I mean, you're welcome to build one, but we're going to test this at the end on the Audio Analyzer Suite, make sure, after some listening tests and sharing with my friends and get them to come over and listen to it, that this is a good sounding 300B amp. So anyway, let's get to building this amp. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to solder up these bridge rectifiers, and as you can see, I've already bent these legs up. You just bend them up shaped kind of like this, so they line up with those holes in the tag strap. And on the very end ones, there's not a lot of extra lead, so you want to put just a real small little angle bend on those. And then obviously, since these are shorter, you're going to have a longer piece sticking out. And then this is going to sit just like that. And then when you get it bent right, you can see that hole lines up. So we're going to use our little helping hand thing again. It just makes it easier to hold this while you're soldering it. And once you get one of the terminals soldered, obviously then it stays in place. So we're going to come in here and solder this guy here. Get our tip clean. Okay. And once we get that attached, we make sure, because these things they'll bend around fairly easily. So once you get one of them soldered in, then I make sure that I've got the hole lined up again before I solder up the rest of them. And it usually works a little better to solder it from this direction, so that any of the excess solder will go through and be on the back side. Let's just make sure we get everything bent just right. We have our hole lined up, because you don't want to have this hole way off and then have this all soldered up and be like, ugh, because then it won't move around as easy. When you only have one of them soldered down, they move around real easy. And if not, you can always heat that one joint up. Once you have all of them soldered, it makes it a lot more difficult to move it around. Then flip this guy over, and you can see we got kind of some excess solder on this side, so we're gonna let gravity be our friend, and okay having like a little blob on the bottom side, because it's just making sure that the leads solder really well to these tag strips. see what the other side looks like now. Let that cool off a second. And it's okay to have kind of big blobs on there. I'm not worried about that. This is all inside the amp anyway. And that's neat enough. I'd rather have a little extra solder there than not enough where it could crack in the future. And then I bend this over on itself. I mean, that might be a little excess. You can always come in and kind of neaten that up a little bit if you want to. There we go. That looks a little better. And then we want to come in and solder this center little tag to itself. And that just gives us a little extra reinforcement here on the mounting thing. We know that it's captured then. That. And then we're all done. And then all we have to do now is figure out where we're going to mount this on the back of the chassis. And we'll drill a hole for each one of these because I've got the other one already done. We're going to have two of these, one for each tube. And then we're going to put some heatsink compound onto this surface and then bolt these to the back of the chassis with a screw coming in from this direction with a nut on this side. And then these outer terminals are the DC and the inner ones are the AC. Oh, and then let me snip off the little bit of excess lead. And then once we get these things mounted, well, you need to be aware that we're going to have this cap. And you could put them like this if you need to stack these things closer together. But I'm hoping I've got enough room to put them in here like this with a little bit of a space, and then put the other cap over here. And then just make sure you orient these correctly because they will explode if you put them in backwards. And when we're putting this cap on, we're going to use a little of this PTFE tubing on the leads just so we don't have to worry about that lead shorting out to here. But anyway, let me figure out where I'm going to put these on the inside of the chassis and get the holes drilled, and I'll show you how to mount these things up. So the last segment I said it didn't matter which way you solder these on, and then I remembered why I did them the way I did the last time. See how this spacing here, it's got a bigger gap along this edge than it does on the other side? If you put these on the other way, these leads are like super close to the chassis. So you really do need to put it in this orientation so that you have the positive AC, AC, and then negative. So that you have some extra spacing here. See what I mean here? See how this has more spacing here than it does on this other side? You can probably see it a little easier in this orientation. See how on this side, the leads are real close to the surface, and then there's got a bigger gap or more plastic on that side. So you want to mount them like that. So let me get these things bolted in the chassis, and I'll show you how to finish wiring them up. So you can see I've got this one bolted down. The next one's going to sit right here. You can see it just fits between this lip and the top of the chassis. But I wanted to show you here was I got some 180 grit sandpaper and smoothed off the powder coating. So, you know, powder coating's got kind of that dimpled, you know, rough texture to it. You want something smooth for the bridge rectifier to seat to. And you can see the heatsink compound or the heat transfer compound squeezing out a little bit from underneath the bridge. So, like I said, the other one, you can see it just barely fits in here. And then the cap is going to sit just like that. And then the second cap will sit like this. And then, again, that's going to be the ground, That's the positive, and then the two AC wires will hook up here. So let me get all this connected up, and we'll hook the wires up, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so we got some more parts put in this thing. We got the ground wire that connects to the bottom hole in this tag strip and runs real close to the tag strip, comes around, it goes up so that the heaters can run under here, or the heater wires. Make sure we keep the AC away from any kind of DC. And then it connects to this terminal here. This is a ground terminal. And then it's got this other little brown wire that runs over to this terminal, which is a ground. And we went ahead and put our grid leak resistor for the input tube. So 1 meg that goes from here to there. And I always put those in. I don't rely on the volume control to be the ground reference for the input tube grid. That's a bad thing to do. So in case the volume pot, or before the volume pot's even installed, we can power the amp up, and the grid's always going to have a ground reference. So again, we got this is a ground, got 1 brown wire that runs over, makes this terminal a ground. Then we tie this terminal and this terminal with this brown wire right here. And then we connect another wire that goes from here, makes this a ground, and we have the grid leak resistor for that tube in. So that's the kind of base wiring that we did on getting the grounds to the front end tubes. And then we went ahead and put the 33 UF first filter cap here, and this is the choke wire, comes here, rectifier tube over the choke, makes this pin hot. Then we have this 10 ohm resistor, comes over to this pin. This is going to be our ground. And then we put this 100 UF, these are 500 volt caps. And then from the bottom hole, this comes up here and becomes the ground to this terminal for our voltage divider for the heater DC voltage lift. And then still got to put a positive wire from here to our B+. This is going to be the output of our power supply filtering. Eventually it's going to have a wire that goes from here to here and then to here. But we're going to do that after we install all these components, because that wire is real easy to hook up. We don't want it in our way while we're connecting all these other components. And then you can see the other tag strips we came up with. This is for the grid of the output tube. It's where the coupling cap's going to hook up. We're going to have a grid leak resistor. I think this one's going to be ground. Same thing over here. This is going to be the grid terminal. This is the ground, grid leak resistor across here. Then we're going to have our grid stopper that goes from here to the grid of the tube. Same thing over here. And this tag strip and this tag strip are where we create the virtual center tap for the output tube cathode / heater. Direct heated tubes, the heater is the cathode. And so we're going to have one heater terminal connected to one of these, one here. We're going to have a couple of 50 ohm dropping resistors that go across this. Same thing over here, a couple of 50 ohm dropping resistors. And then this will be the cathode terminal for the output tube. So I'm going to start wiring up one of these tubes, and I'll come back and show you where everything goes. Yeah, here we are getting this thing wired up. So let me go do that, and we'll come back and show you what that looks like. This looks like a good place to wrap up this segment. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes of this build series. Again, this is our ultra budget or base model 300B amp, and hopefully we can get something that's going to sound nice at a price point that is good for a starter tube amp. That it's not going to be as cheap as those China ones, but it's actually going to be a good sounding amp or we're not going to put the Skunky badge on it. So thanks to all you folks that are subscribers, folks that are members of my Patreon, and otherwise have supported the channel, either with donations of money or your time, folks that have helped me with the CAD work as volunteers. And none of this would be possible without you out there that have helped the channel grow and have helped my little company grow. So again, thanks, and we'll see you on the next segment. Have a nice day.